April 8th, 2026. We are in the 5th year, and this is day 44 since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. Welcome to the Situation Report. In today's report, we will look at the following. Specifically, shifts on the Russian side regarding troop concentrations at a rather important section of the front. But we will also look at attacks from both sides, and especially at a possible new record that a German Leopard 2 in Ukraine may have broken. We'll cover that at the end of the report. On the night of April 5th to 6th, the railway ferry Slavyansk was hit by a Ukrainian drone attack in the Kerch Strait. This was reported by the Ukrainian intelligence service. According to this information, this is the last currently operational railway ferry on this route to Crimea. According to this, the ship was damaged to such an extent that it cannot be used for the time being. These ferries currently play a special role because they transport not only personnel or light goods, but also heavy equipment for rail logistics, as well as, for example, tank cars containing oil or fuel for the tanks and vehicles of the Russian army. Especially in connection with the Crimean Bridge, they serve as an additional or alternative supply route in case it is damaged or fails. If such a capability is lost, it does not immediately mean a complete supply stop, but flexibility is significantly reduced. Transports have to be rerouted, extended, or organized differently. And it is exactly these additional detours and delays that add up over time. Soldiers of the Ukrainian 5th Heavy Mechanized Brigade show a Leopard 1 A5DK that has been significantly modified beyond the original standard. The vehicle has been equipped with a considerable amount of Contact 1 reactive add-on armor. It also features classic cage armor, primarily designed to protect against drones and improvised attacks. The whole thing is complemented by another anti-drone modification, which is a clear sign of where the focus lies on the current battlefield. They copied the Russians' version. I can't remember the Russian word for it right now, but it's the one that's closest to the word dandelion, because that's what the Russians call their active anti-drone defense, as we can see here in the Ukrainian replica. And it's actually not that bad. The integration of external cameras is particularly interesting. This significantly improves the crew's all-around visibility, which is crucial in an environment where threats apparently come from close range and from the air. You can clearly see here how older platforms are being adapted to remain effective on today's battlefield. It's less about making the tank more modern and more about specifically adapting it to current threats. And nowadays, those threats mainly come from above. As I've done several times this year, let me once again remind you of basic infantry principles. Always remember, if you ever find yourself in such a situation, never stand in large groups out in the field. Every enemy is as happy as a little child if he only needs a single drone, grenade, or explosive to cause maximum damage to all the soldiers standing around. But the Russians don't learn, so once again I can show a video like this. This benefits Ukrainians, but it's unfortunate Russian soldiers lacked proper basic training. Regardless of nation or army, anyone is really in a bad spot if they aren't taught the basics, but are sent to the front. Or it's their own fault. They can't or don't want to put that into practice. And then exactly this kind of thing happens. With those words, let's take a look at the Russian offensive, because the Russian offensive still isn't making progress, since the Ukrainians themselves have a counteroffensive underway. That's not the main reason it's not moving forward, but it does play a part. So the Russian armed forces have to adjust their plans in some areas. Why is that? Well, they have to find the right balance. And that's between how many subunits do I need to achieve territorial gains, and how many do I have to hold back so that the Ukrainians can't make territorial gains on neighboring front sections. But the fact is, they're hardly making any progress at this point. The Russians are still attacking westward, as shown by the attack arrows here. We also discussed this in yesterday's situation report. This is mainly the direction in which the Russians are advancing, namely towards the west. Of course, there are some attacks, like near the village of Zvitkowel. That's here by Hill 153. They're also trying to break through here, but that's really just the smallest part of the attacks. I think 97% of them are taking place in this area, with the goal of advancing further west. And when the Russians attack here, the Ukrainians try to achieve a similar goal a few kilometers further north. They are attacking here towards the south and trying to reach this line. Let's just assume they will achieve this goal. Let's assume the Ukrainians reach this goal. Then they will really severely disrupt the Russian supply lines, since these mainly run along this road here. And also along the road down here. But that means one of the two supply routes would definitely be at risk. And the units located here will also be at risk because this flank attack here will put them under increasing pressure. At Pokrovsk, the Russians aren't really making any progress either because the Ukrainians are able to hold and monitor the surrounding area quite well along their supply line at the neighboring area. At Pokrovsk, breaking through is even tougher than here, which is why the Russians created the new 55th. Marine Infantry Division as well as the 68th Corps have been relocated to the area around Hujajpol to support the offensive efforts. By the way, the 55th Division was newly established but from old units, so it was more like it was formed, mainly from the legendary 155th Marine Infantry Brigade. That means it wasn't created alongside the existing units and equipped with soldiers and equipment, but rather that there was a reorganization within the armed forces. This isn't directly about Ukraine, but it's indirectly related. U.S. President Donald Trump is apparently about to hold talks with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte about a possible withdrawal of the United States from NATO. According to sources from the White House, such a step is currently at least being considered internally. The issue is not off the table, but is the subject of ongoing discussions at the highest level. The mere fact that this is being discussed already carries its own weight. The U.S. is the central military backbone of NATO, both in terms of deterrence and operational leadership, and also one of the countries that possess nuclear weapons. A withdrawal would fundamentally change the entire structure of the alliance, not only militarily, but above all, politically. Other countries may now see an opportunity in this destabilization and take advantage of it. For Europe, this would mean taking on significantly more responsibility itself, not only politically, but above all militarily, which in my opinion Europe very much needs. Unfortunately, I see that the current Europe is not able to achieve these goals or gain the necessary competencies in the coming years. And exactly the next years, that's actually not true. Actually, it's more about the past years we're talking about here, not just the coming years. Because Europe is lagging behind again and will suddenly be expected to shoulder a great deal of responsibility and show a high level of competence, which will hardly be possible since we are still debating and discussing too much instead of actually taking action. This is also evident with the Hungary issue. How long has this been going on? How long will Hungary continue to maintain the pressure at the expense of other European countries and block many important decisions without the rest being able to do anything about it? And how much has actually been done about it so far? Hardly anything, except that it was criticized once, and even if we managed to do it, the balance of power within the alliance would still shift massively, even if only temporarily. Whether such a step will actually be taken remains unclear, but the very discussion about it shows how much the security situation is currently in flux. Speaking of Hungary, there is currently an accusation attracting attention in the political sphere, which revolves around possible influence on elections. This time, the focus is on Hungary. The background is a comparison that is currently circulating. In 2024, U.S. politicians, including J.D. Vance, accused Ukraine of indirectly interfering in the American election campaign. One of the triggers back then was a visit by Zelensky to an arms manufacturer in the politically sensitive state of Pennsylvania. In this context, there was also criticism of the Ukrainian ambassador. Now, attention is being drawn to a recent development. Shortly before the elections in Hungary, J.D. Vance traveled to Budapest and appeared publicly there alongside Viktor Orban. In doing so, he expressed support for the Hungarian government and at the same time addressed allegations that Ukrainian actors might be trying to influence the Hungarian elections. These two results are now being presented as contradictory, just as we often see now in the MAGA government, where previous external political signals from Ukraine were considered problematic. A comparable appearance by a U.S. politician in the European context is evaluated differently. Regardless of the evaluation, the process mainly shows one thing. The question of political influence across national borders has long been part of current geopolitical conflicts and is increasingly becoming an instrument of political communication itself. By the way, the picture of the two of them really reminds me of this meme from The Office. A report from the military struggle. It is currently attracting attention among military experts. According to this, a Ukrainian Leopard 2A6 is said to have destroyed a Russian T-72B3 from a distance of about 3.5 kilometers. If this is confirmed, it would be a new record for tank versus tank combat. The previously known record was from 1991 when a British Challenger 1 knocked out a target at about 5.1 kilometers during the Gulf War. The newly reported record would therefore be even higher, by 0.4 kilometers. But it must be made clear that none of this has been confirmed so far. There is no footage and no technical proof. So far, it's just a report, nothing more. At the same time, experts consider it fundamentally plausible. And that's where it gets interesting. Modern systems like the Leopard 2A6 do have very precise fire control technology, laser rangefinders, and powerful ammunition. But that's not enough on its own for such distances. The crucial point is the so-called kill chain. In Ukraine, this means drones identify targets, provide exact coordinates, make real-time corrections, and only then does the actual shot happen. So the tank is just the firing element and a part of a networked system or a well-coordinated process. That's exactly why such extreme ranges can even become relevant, which the tank alone might not even be able to achieve. Without networking, they wouldn't be as usable in a war like this. Thank you to all subscribers, channel members, and the Algo crew, especially Lieutenant Colonel Rennecke. I'm Dietrich Kiesler from Demo Meyerhofer. Please subscribe, like, comment, and see you in the next Situation Report.